So last week showed some preview art, and was kind of talking a little bit about my scripting process. And one of the things I talked about is I actually write it on paper first, and then I'll convert it over to a Word document, and obviously edit in the process. I did that with my novels to an extent too, just to give that kind of extra opportunity to edit. And about how maybe on my Word document I'm up to like 50 written comic pages, but it's
Nice.
actually like 200 Word pages. So a lot of text, a lot of detail, and yeah, I figured I'd maybe give a kind of a teaser into that, go over one of the pages that I showed folks the art, and show them the script itself, so you can kind of see how I do the layout and uh, kind of what my approach is. So let me pull up the art first.
Man, that's a really cool idea. I can't remember the last time I saw, especially someone in the indie sphere, do that,
Mm.
like ever.
Yeah, and there's something about writing in pencil that I just find therapeutic. Not so much for a novel because it's like daunting because there's so much to write, but for a comic, since there's not a lot of actual text, like I really enjoy not being chained to a computer, like just being able to sit somewhere without the distraction of the computer or the phone, just have music going, and just doing it old school I don't know, I really enjoy it.
You also will tend to remember what you wrote down with your hand versus what you type out.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, so let me try to share the entire screen here. Let's see how this will work.
And a little bit of literary nerd talk for anybody in the chat that likes that kind of stuff. Vladimir Nabokov of Lolita fame, he would write, I think, all of his novels on index cards, and that's how he would do his novels.
It's interesting.
Yep, crazy guy.
Yeah. So this was one of the pages here from the first chapter, the first comic. Again, sign up page should be up in a couple of weeks. You'll see one blackout area here, which is a typo in the lettering. You gotta correct, but so this is a sequence earlier in the book where obviously the hero Slade. No shocker where the inspiration for that name came from after doing that review. But Slade Island here, confront this basically rapist in an alleyway here, and you get some initial interaction between the rapist and Slade, to where Slade finally loses it and goes to protect the woman. A little zooming in on the panels here before we switch over to the script. I'll try to kind of overlay them a little bit, but try to make the panels all at least like kind of medium size, like these ones here, so that my artist can do as much detail as possible. So it's always that balance too, when you're limited in page count because of the cost of, you want to get as much on the page as possible, but not at the cost of giving up details and background detail even. So I try to have kind of a balance between 5 to 8 panels. Obviously that's dependent too on if you have some small overlapping panels on a larger panel, but every once in a while I'll do 2 or 3 panels if there's some dynamic shots that you're trying to get extra detail on, or a splash page. But this one, for example, right, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, end of 10. But obviously 2 of them are true overlapping panels here. Let me pull up the script here. All right.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So let's see if I can. So yeah, as you can see, 32,000 words 200 pages.
Good lord, man. That's a novella.
Pretty much. So what I typically do now, since the nice thing is, since this is a translation or adaptation from an existing novel, I can reference the actual pages where applicable. So I can give my artist, like, hey, you can read these pages before, during, or whatever, right, to get more details. And then I'll just start going into the panel itself. And I kind of fine-tuned it as I got farther down into the pages. But typically I'd start and just say, okay, here's the first panel. What's the point of view in terms of the reader, right? Is this a bird's eye view? Is this a ground up shot? Is this a direct side shot? And then I'll give some detail of, it's aimed at the right side of, character A or character B. But for example, this one, right, here's first panel. It's a close-up of the upper bodies of both the rapist and Rachel. And, the rapist has his head pulled back a bit away from Rachel and turned toward the reader / Slade. So artist did a perfect job there. His face is calm, seemingly unaffected. And then Rachel's head is like slightly tilted, like she's gasping for air and trying to look towards the protagonist Slade here. Give him some direction in regards to, I want to have lettering for like a gasp sound, and then he came up with a good onomatopoeia for that. And then I'll indicate, all right, here's your first piece of dialogue here, and I'll kind of give a little bit more detail in regards to the face. Drawing a blank here, but the expression on the face of the character. So with a blank face, the rapist says, get out of here. This doesn't concern you. And that's obviously the trigger for word bubble. And then, going into the second panel here where, I asked for a split panel, first half of the panel, second half of the panel. And then I indicate, like, here's where I want internal monologue. And as mentioned, similar to Frank Miller, like, I go very heavy in the internal monologue to get inside the character's head so that you know what he's thinking, what he's feeling, so you can get a deeper connection essentially with the character. It slows up the story a bit, which I like. It's intentional at times, but it also just allows you to go a little bit deeper beyond the surface than just, trying to show every feeling, which is going to add a lot of additional art where we don't have that luxury. So instead, do the internal monologue. I also like that it slows the reader up a little bit to really focus on what's going on in the panel versus just breezing through the panel, because you're just trying to go from panel to panel, which I think with some of the surface level books, that's what you end up doing. You just breeze through it so quick that you don't get a lot out of each panel or what's actually should be explained in each panel. And then, obviously it's clear that's an indication here with the solid box there that's internal monologue. And then, similarly, I did that with the third panel here, just trying to give the artist as much detail of what's going on in the shot, the facial expressions, the fact that she's got, tears running down her face, that she's reaching out with, specifically her left hand towards the protagonist here, Slade, who's looking around the corner into the alleyway here. And then again, just indicating what's the first dialogue, second and third, who it's coming from, so that he can link those bubbles where needed and have the proper sequence.
BA, do you draw at all?
No, well, I can recreate pieces decently for a noob, but I definitely cannot draw anything from scratch. I don't
Okay.
have any skill whatsoever in that.
Well, you must
in
have
regards
some
to that.
kind of like artistic eye, like the way you're describing things. So, like, it seems like you've got these images in your head held really well before you write them down.
And I think that's just from being so into film. Like I imagine everything as if it's being shot through a camera, and I'm basically doing a film script. And that's where, especially, and I'll show like further down, like I get a lot more detailed in regards to camera angles, and if the camera's on a 45-degree angle or the character's on a 45-degree angle, like I can really, well, I think like everybody, right? When you're writing a script, you're daydreaming at the same time, right? When you're writing a novel, you're daydreaming, and you're kind of subconsciously typing out what's in your mind, and that's how I treat the script. Is I'm visualizing it as if it's a coming through a camera for a film, and I have this very, I think through what angles I want, and I try to really hone in and be as specific as possible so that when I read the comics, it's exactly as I would visualize it in my mind versus letting the artist guess or putting more work on the artist. But again, as mentioned last week, like I tell the artist, like, hey, if you have a better concept for the panel, whether it's dialogue, facial expressions, panel size, POV, all that, like run with it. You have the most experience. I'm flexible on everything. I'm just putting out how I am visualizing it in my mind.
Hmm. No, that's cool,
And it's
man. This
fun
this
too.
is this is insightful for me. Like my scripts are like so hack and slash compared to this. This I'm like looking at it, I'm like, man, this is really cool. This is a really cool way to organize things.
And like, this panel here, which, this is where, he took, his own kind of insight in making them overlapping panels to make sure that we could fit everything that I was hoping to get on the page in there. So like right here where Rachel gets slapped, right? I'm specifically saying in one swift motion, the thug slaps the woman across the face, specifically with his right hand, forcing blood to spew from her nose and mouth as her black raven hair is brushed in front of her face and her head whips across to the right. And that's the thing too, like I find myself being very particular in regards to directions of things, right? Because I can only imagine how hard it can be on an artist when it's, if you were to just say, oh, the rapist hits the woman in the face. And then it's like he's got to kind of think, okay, what direction, which hand is he slapping with? What direction is the head going? Because the thing is, it leaves it on the artist a lot of responsibility to connect that into the next panel or to sequences down the line, right? And I've seen this in indie comics too, where the directions are all over the place. Like, oh, you have the character right here, right? He's reaching forward with his right hand, and then one of the other panels, it's flipped. And I think that's maybe because the artist or the writer wasn't very specific to prevent that from happening. And you don't want to confuse the reader of wait. You don't want him to stop in the middle of the page and be like, wait, wasn't the character over there? Wait, why is he twisted around now? Like, now I'm confused, and it pulls them out of the story, which that's what you don't want. You never want them to be pulled out of the story. You want them in there, like they're experiencing a film, for example. And so, like, I'm very, very detailed in regards to what hand, what body parts doing the movement, what direction is it going, and then on the opposite end, the receiving end, I guess you could say, making sure it lines up just so it's easier for the artist.
That makes a lot of sense.
So like here, for example, right, it wouldn't have made sense for him to tackle him from the left side because, as you can see, right, he's on the right side of the panel, clearly would have rushed at him this way, and so that's what happens. It's directional, and it makes sense. Otherwise, it would be odd if he was going to the other side of the panel. So I try to make sure I don't confuse the reader or make it muddy. Oh, thank you, Lucid. So he says, that's a cool approach. I develop all of the backstory and character bios, and then based on all that, I sketch out the rough sequentials, and then I write the script. Very cool. Yeah, I wish I had the ability to even do the rough sequentials. I can do panel layouts, and I do that occasionally, where I'll sketch those out, but man, I cannot cannot go beyond that. But luckily my artist is amazing at taking reference material and sketching out the character, the roughs and all of that. That's one thing I rely on quite a bit, which from my artist feedback is reference material. Like I try to put in actual shots from comics, films, like this, like, hey, right here, this POV, the way these characters are standing, or this facial expression, make it just like this, so that there's no guesswork. The artist can just go right into it. Otherwise, they kind of have to do a lot of extra work, and that just slows up the process. And yeah, exactly. You have the artist provide the thumbnail so you can catch it before the page is finalized. And that's where my artist would give me updates throughout each step so that we could make adjustments where needed, and just made it a lot more fluid. What's going on, JD? Thanks for being here. And then let's see here. But yeah, I mean, that essentially is kind of some insight, there, where and like here, I originally was going to have them be, and they kind of are like connective panels here, but for the 5th, 6th, and 7th here, just kind of breaking down, like I want him to charge, to tackle, and then the rapist cracks his head against the ground. And like this panel here was one that he added, where he's just like, yeah, I think it'd be cool just to show like that point of view here with the blood flying out of the mouth, and it just worked out, perfectly. And even like for really small details, and I think for this panel here, we're even going to add some details to the background so that there's not so much white space. But like in the book, I specifically wanted to highlight that as she falls, because obviously the rapist is, got her in a chokehold up against the wall. So when Slade tackles him, she'd go crashing down. But that this necklace, which is crucial to the story later on, that it's in the image and that you can see that it's broken from her neck and is flying away, because that necklace will come back into the storyline later on. And so, I gave enough detail to make sure that gets captured on the page somehow.
Those little things are important, man. Like when you're going back through after something's drawn and you realize, like, like this needed to be, this is crucial, and I need to highlight this. Yeah, that's the most, to me, like editing is the most fun and the most awful part, especially after all the art is done. But I mean, little things like that, man, that's what's impressed me. Like you've got everything so well organized to begin with. Like that's really impressive to me.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's funny that like I'd never tried to do any scripting for a comic before. I kind of just approached it in the same way as the novels, but it did it in bullet point format, and just condensed each page from the novel into the comic. But I did add a big sequence to the story in the comic that's not there in the novel, just because I thought it would enhance the story, and it was just something that I thought the visuals would really, like that part of the story would really benefit from the visual aspect, which obviously I couldn't do in the novels. So, and like, for example, here's one of the images I shared last week with the front of the church. So here's the reference material right here. And, I told him, like, here, add some really gnarly looking gargoyles. right? Make it unique. He did that. You know, he added his flair to the design, and you know, just was like, yeah, just basically crop everything else out, make it black, and then just focus on this part. And yeah, you saw obviously how detailed he went, even with the wood grain. But yeah, so yeah. So I'll give, you know, reference material from real things, you know, real places, and then, you know, stuff from, I don't know. Obviously, there's
That's really cool, man.
the church, right?
Yeah. This
So,
kind
yeah.
of stuff is, I think, like revitalizing to like the scene and to art in general. Like just seeing like the love and compassion, like passion and care in this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know this book is gonna be like technically good.
Mm-hmm. I sure hope so. Definitely feeling good about it. But yeah, I mean, like even like I had you know, one of the panels where it's like I'm trying to explain, you know, in my head, right? I'm thinking like, okay, this is exactly how I image, you know, the tensing of the neck, you know, exposing of the teeth, the point of view, and it's like, oh, I found an image that lines up perfectly. It's like have my character look exactly like this and have the panel be laid out like this. You know,
Yeah.
so it's super easy for him to basically translate it. So yeah, that's a little bit of insight into how I'm scripting the comic. And yeah, as mentioned, the plan is to start with two 60-page books. So the first campaign will be for the first 60-page book. Second will obviously be for the second 60-page book. I originally wanted to do 90 to 100-page book, but with how things are growing in crowdfunding, I didn't want to get too aggressive. So I'm basically hoping to just do two consecutive campaigns so there's not a long wait in between the two, but give myself a better chance to try to at least recover costs. I'm going to make this happen no matter what, but you know, if somehow I get really lucky and the first campaign funds really, really well, then I would probably just condense the two and give everybody more, but I'm not going to bank on that. So maybe 4 years ago I would have, or 8 years ago, but these days it's definitely a tougher arena. So